Hello, ladies and gentlemen. The LEC format, the resistance in terms of practice, KC, Hobie, a bunch of things to cover. Let's get to it. I made a list of the things I'm going to go through, but I'm just going to pour out my thoughts like a never-ending faucet. So let's jump into it. Format. After watching LPL and LCK before LEC started, watching LTA too, LEC as a format, I understand the issue that they are facing in terms of studio days. They have very limited studio days because it's very expensive to run the studio, very expensive to have all, the things in place in terms of, especially in Germany, like with the laws you need to abide by in terms of hours and in terms of, security, safety, all that jazz. It's very expensive to run an LEC studio day. So they only have 3 days. So they don't have the liberty to run as exciting of a format as the LCK because they have a triple round robin in the group stage, right? A triple round robin means they play a lot more games, which means that they start on Wednesday and run through all the way to Sunday, the same way LPL just plays every single damn day because obviously they have 16 teams, well, -2 because 2 teams were kicked out in spring for summer, OMG and RNG. Very shameful. It is what it is. LEC format. Right now, it's like, in terms of the games we're looking forward to, especially now with GX, GX against KC was a little bit high because of all the scrim rumors that we heard. But other than that, it's like KC, Koi, Fnatic, G2, everything else is kind of easy. I'm looking forward to seeing the top 4 teams, right? In a world where, let's say, they would replicate the LCK format. Imagine a world right now where we would have KC, Koi, G2, Fnatic, and GX in one group playing against each other time and time again, I think that would just be simply amazing. And we are getting spoiled over in the LPL and LCK because we get good matchups after good matchups after good matchups. Like every week we have a How Alive, T1, Genji, some combination of these teams facing off against each other, and it's just feels fantastic to watch. The fact that this format is, necessary and the fact that it feels good to watch it is just a problem of franchising in esports, right? It's like, this is the solution to franchising in an indirect way. Basically, if you're a lower end team and you're not performing, you get put in essentially tier 2 of the region, and then you can qualify up into the tier 1 again because you make playoffs if, you reach top 3 in your bottom group, right? Same thing for the LPL. LPL went even further, as I mentioned, 2 teams were already out in spring. That is their solution to franchising, in a sense that esports is, of course, insanely top heavy. But it is what it is. What can we discuss about the teams? I think in conjunction with the format, I wanted to talk about resistance. A big topic in my mind, right, is the teams that went to the internationals. When we look at AL and Genji, there's a clear dip in performance. They are recovering, really digesting the experience. T1, I think they are masters of dealing with jet lag and all the bullshit because their schedules are probably more stressful than any other player, So they just hit the ground running. They're like, yo, this is like Tuesday for us, This is no problem. EWC. All that jazz, no problem. Fake, you want to sign 4 more years? Easy. Let's rock and roll. Let's jump on the rift and let's smurf. Let's beat Genji. Obviously, they are a outlier. Bilibili, have the honeymoon period now with, of course, Shadow. But focusing now on Europe, G2 and Koi having the travel from Saudi Arabia to then Europe. You barely have any jet lag, if any at all, right? The distance and the time zone difference is almost, inconsequential. And at the same time, LEC gave them a grace period by them skipping out the first week, so they have more time to digest the patch, take it easy, and importantly also digest experience. When I say digest experience, is just because you went through something doesn't mean it makes you stronger. The scenarios where going through something can make you weaker if you don't properly digest it. By digesting is basically having a deep reflection and landing correctly in terms of what are the good takeaways, what have you done correctly, and what are the things that you need to change and build on, and will it be an experience that you use for good, in the sense that is it something that you can tap into? Like if I give a very, very easy example, like this I recommend to anyone, is if you are going into scenarios that are familiar, are you pulling from your own experience in a positive manner that gives you confidence because you reflected on it and reached the right conclusions? Or is it just something that is lingering, and do you find yourself in a position to make the same mistake that you've had in the past? Dealing with your own demons and your own experience doesn't truly become experience unless you thoroughly think it through. And teams that are rushed, teams that are pressed to perform right again, don't properly digest it. Think about How Alive. They got reverse swept by Gen G. Must have been tough. 2 days later, they need to jump into a match against T1 that decides their fate if they go to MSI or no. There's certain players that can pull, experience from that, but this was a How Alive that got it done in Game 5s throughout the entire Winter Cup. Throughout the entire, entirety of first stand. They didn't really have resistance as first stand, but the LCK Cup is the one that stands. Then that came as a shock to the system of a place, a building of confidence that was shattered, that was on the foundation that they can get it done in Game 5s. But when it doesn't happen, you need to kind of rearrange things, and How Alive couldn't. T1 took that opportunity, seized it, and beat them 3-0. So, why am I saying all of this? Resistance of practice. KC have things to improve. Fnatic have things to improve. Teams all around, of course, in this region have things to improve. Koi and G2 went internationally, scrimmed internationally, got to take a proper break. I think that the advantage of how useful and fruitful these last 2 months have been for Koi and G2 in comparison to KC, Fnatic, is staggering. Because look at it from KC's perspective. They had a objective failure, right, in the last split. Individually, they are great players. They have a insanely high ceiling. But now in terms of the resistance in their group, the resistance in practice that they had leading up to the competition, because I know and I can confirm that G2 Koi, they took a break, right? They took a break, they rested and recovered. Who did KC practice against? Who did they prep against during this off-season? They probably took a lot of time off. I know a lot of the teams took a lot of time off. How does that improve you? Does it make you worse, right? What happens in the process of that? Same thing for Fnatic. They made roster changes. They started practicing quite late, getting Poby over and so forth. Who did they practice against? Sure, Fnatic, KC can practice against each other. Obviously, GX benefit because they have teams that are objectively better than them that they can practice against in terms of building resistance in KC and Fnatic. But the challenge of KC addressing their weaknesses is very difficult. Same thing for Fnatic, but they have different challenges because at least they are dealing with a lot of data and they have a new player, so they can kind of look at everything from a fresh light and reinvent themselves within the dynamic. The reason I bring this up is because KC in particular, it looks like they are exactly the same team of where we left off. And that could be good, that could be bad, right? But with how the format is, you kind of need to hit the ground running right away. You don't really have room to be okay. Things will go fast. I don't have a doubt that KC, Koi, and Fnatic and G2 are going to make top 2. Right? The main question here is GX. Can they beat Koi? Can they cause an upset win there? And because Navi, Vitality is out, Team Heretics, SK, I think they have nothing to do. And BDS on top of that don't look good at all. So Fnatic, G2 is like a lock in top 2. So maybe in that there's some leeway, there's some breathing room that you can play around with and you can improve during that period. But for the other teams, it's like what they showed now is basically where they're at. It's like, how much can SK improve? It's like the regular split is not lasting that long. Like it's gonna be over in no time. Same thing for Team Heretics, same thing for Navi, same thing for Vitality. This is what you prepped for the last 2 months. You don't get to say, ooh, it was week 1, it was our first series, we have some things ironed out. No. There's no room for that shit. There's no room for that shit. Things are gonna go fast, and every damn series that you play matters. The design of this format is not to improve within it. The design of it is to improve ahead of it and then to hit the ground running, unless you are a top 2 on paper guaranteed team to of course make the other side of the bracket. Just to loop everyone in, summer playoffs is if you make top 2 in your groups, you are then in the Guardian Angel side. And if you win 1 best of 5 from the GA, you are instantly at Worlds. You make top 3, boom, you are in round 3 right away, and if you lose, you of course top 3 guaranteed, right? So getting that GA is insanely OP, and then the loser bracket, after loser bracket it goes, and the other teams just have to start from lower. And of course the bottom two teams, meaning the last place team in both groups, just doesn't make playoffs at all. Okay? So this is going to be super important. But to reiterate, I don't envy the position KC was in this offseason. They added Niski to put pressure on Vladi. Seems like, KC and their approach, what I really appreciate about them is that they are very aggressive in making changes when they don't think in the long term it's going to benefit them, while even in the short term it can hurt them. I say that from experience. Like, they removed me from my post. Obviously, I thought in the end it was a just dumb mistake to hire me because they knew exactly who I was and how I work, right? And I think for spring it was terrible. I think I would have done way better in spring. But they, at that point in time, when they saw winter, they decided to use spring to see who are we going to keep for the future? Who are we going to add to our future prospect? They added me in hopes that I would hit the ground running and we would, elevate our team instantly to a very high level. That didn't happen, and they decided to pivot. They have been aggressive in their changes, even in LFL. When they didn't make playoffs, boom, they made changes, brought in new talent, boom, Kalis is going to play, and then like a rocket ship, win LFL, win EMEA Masters, and they're back on that page. And KC, in this moment with Vladi, a super talent, they're also aggressive about getting the most out of him with his Niski addition. And I think it's good. I think it's really good. If you have an avenue to put pressure, I think you nip it in the bud early. You don't want to create a habit of comfort. And I think I trust KC in this decision to bring in Niski to put pressure on Vladi. I think Vladi should be a better player than Niski. I think Vladi is a great talent. Just a fantastic future player and current player for the league. But if he has motivation issues, you better hit it hard now. You don't do that later, you do it now. And I have deep respect for KC and their approach, because now at this point, KC's decision making has a very clear history of success in the LFL that carry over to EMEA Masters, and now KC, after 1 year and then boom, in the second year of LEC, they managed to of course win. But I repeat, I don't envy the position of the challenge of improving, because I do think that G2 and Koi have of course advantage. What was on the agenda after that? I mentioned KC. I mentioned that their games look very similar because they did. Against Na'Vi, they were early game, and game 1 didn't look that great. Their games against GX, game 3, I think they had a very good draft, but I think if it wasn't for Kana completely smurfing, I think they should have lost games earlier to that. The game 1 in particular, the Kana Jax was just tremendous. And KC out teamfight GX in the end, but I think their early games, I feel like Yike has reverted back to the player that I thought he was on G2. And I think that player doesn't work super well for this KC. They need to figure out ways to take a broader leadership role in the jungle position and the support position. But I think in the shift of the meta, I think the best version of Yike is when he gets to concentrate on something specific. And right now, the meta in jungle is very broad in terms of what you need to play. And I think that when KC need to shift in the roles of what their players need to be, I think this is where they struggle. But we can see that they are trying to implement, new layers that give them flexibility. I think what stood out in particular was on day 1, KC played Psy on top, and then I believe a K'Sante game as well. This is a new look, because most of the time they were in situations where they played tank junglers, tank supports. And in, of course, this world where KC is trying to expand, Kana needs to be able to play the tank side too, because there's going to be games where that's really good to do. So KC's vision is very clear. In regards to Fnatic, I think it's the next thing that we can talk about. I already made a video on Polby. I think Polby has been a fantastic addition. I think that he looks like a very solid player. I think on day 1, Fnatic game 1 and 2 looked very nervous. Razok in particular looked very nervous to me. Game 3 on the Trundle, where they were diving and they were popping off. I think this was a very clear, successful game. This is how I imagined this series to look like, Fnatic versus Team Heretics. I don't imagine ever for them to lose a single game against Team Heretics, because on this day, Sheo was much better in the jungle against Razork. And I say this as his big brother. I really want him to do well. But I think the second series was easy breezy. Fnatic stomped them in game 1 in no time. This one is a little bit more contentious, but in the end, you know, they tried some more unique picks here and there, but there was the 2v2 kill that the YamatoCannon did. The Ezreal Bard, it's like upset the laning together with Bard. There's something cursed about it. And I have PTSD of how much he hated it. You know, he would not resist with his words, but I could see how it affected him. Like, Bard is the venom inside of him. You know, like the movie Venom, you know? Like it would just, the Bard would just bulge. Yeah, you know what I mean. Either way, I think Fnatic have found a solid mid laner in Poby. The main thing that I am looking forward to is how Razork raises his consistency and his level. Because in the end, Razork is the one now that is left out of the pair that is now separated. And this is the chance for him to prove himself or to show that maybe he was the problem. But I believe in Razork, I believe in Fnatic, and I think Poby had as good of a start as you could have asked for. I think nothing super flashy, but laning looked good, and at the same time, I think that his understanding of side laning was also super good. I think he's very efficient in terms of how he chooses the timers to attack. This might sound simple, but not dying to ganks, not dying to super roam timers, being on point with the rhythm of the game is, I think Poppy's doing a nice job in that department, which I think is super nice. And if anything, this is something that you could maybe criticize Humanoid for, right? It's like dying to the ganks, not being in the rhythm of the game, timing on the side, just sometimes just being off a beat, you know? It's like losing a drumstick and, you know, losing the rhythm of the band, so to speak. What else can we talk about? GX, you know, everyone was hyped about their scrims, but I think that we got to see a better GX. I think that they have some individually skilled players. I think usually with teams that have good, like, rumors about their scrims, it's usually tied to their early game. I think Isma was never bad in the early game. Now it looks even better, and I think they have a resemblance of a mid game, which is nice. But my main concern about GX, which disappoints me the most, which disappoints because I had high expectations, is Jackie. I expect way more from Jackies. If GX wants to be a competitor and be in the conversation of top 4, Jackies needs to play much better. We can't have the worst Silas game that we've ever seen in the LEC be slammed in 5 and then perform like that because he invited that Azir first pick. He invited Vladdy's best pick to prove a point. He was the one that basically said, guys, we can invite this, we can get the Rumble, and we're going to be able to win because I have answers into this Azir. He agreed to this. That's a big responsibility to take, but I can only respect it if you deliver. He didn't. I think in the Vitality series, he was rather quiet too, but I have higher expectations from the man. Vitality, on the other hand, you know, Neo came out and said, coaching staff out if they don't make top 4. I respect that, you know. Tough challenge, very tough challenge. But he put pressure on the Vitality coaching staff. They've been given, you know, everything that they've asked for, whether it was players, buyouts for Linsas out of KC. They got the Niski angle, they got Fleshy out of the Vitality, you know, team. They managed to take the rookies out from the academy. They benched Hilly, even though they insisted on hiring Hilly. You know, they have gotten free reign over this Vitality roster. That's how it seems like from outside. And if they don't succeed, I think honestly it's on them. It's on them. And I think that's why always it's so important in terms of evaluating people, players as well, coaches, is that if they manage to succeed in one team, can they replicate it elsewhere? That continuity really, really proves the point. And that's why I'm the GOAT. No, I'm kidding. But I did find success in multiple different teams, multiple different rosters, and I'm allowed to be proud of that. Let's continue. What else can we talk about? Newcomers. Hobby we talked about. Fleshy, we can mention. Fleshy, I am not impressed. I think if someone told me this was Niski playing, I would believe it. You know? I am not super impressed. I wasn't super excited by the hiring in the first place, if I'm going to be honest. think Fleshy has always been... I don't think there's been a period where he stood out to me as like the best up-and-coming support out of ERLs. And even then, moving from ERL to, of course, the LEC, you need to be given a lot of time. So much time. Support is the most experience-driven role. It's very, very tough to piece together. And when you lack that experience, it's like the reason I believed in the potential of the Niski project was over time, maybe that can become something because he's working backwards. He has the experience, but he needs to figure out the role. Fleshy, lanes better, knows the role better, but he doesn't have, I think, the pedigree to really, you know, make this team well-rounded. Additionally, I don't like this angle that Vitality played with in the series. I don't want to see Nako on K'Sante. I don't want to see him on Ornn. So screw that. But Fleshy, middling performance, first series. Let's see what else he can do. Who else is a newcomer? The entire SK lineup, you know, Din. It's like, I don't know, SK, I don't even want to talk about SK. I thought Tiger in the first game, it looked decent against KC on the Pantheon. But other than that, I think that it was fairly limited. I don't think there was much to be done in that game too, because Nico just exploded the lane phase, and then I think now we just played from the back foot. BDS. BDS is also exactly the same team. It's like praying for ice, you know? Praying for ice. It's like 30 minutes of nothingness. I thought that Nuke found a good play on the Silas against the Azir. Then again, you're beating down on an SK Gaming that is not an interesting team. BDS doesn't seem to have changed, besides the fact that they have a mechanically strong jungler. And I think the main thing to consider is, and a conversation to open up more and more is, was BDS's biggest mistake to let go of Shio? Because Shio, I think, looks unbelievable on this Team Heretics team. I think he's had a fantastic year. I think it goes to the point where he gets like an honorary like MVP angle. It's hard to imagine it that far because the top 4 is so competitive and standouts are required for you to win, right? Alvaro and how Elioya played, and you know, these standouts are so massive. But Shio is doing God's work for this Team Heretics roster because Team Heretics don't have a mid lane. I'm sorry to say it, but Camilo, I would be very, very surprised if he makes the cut for the next year in terms of being a mid laner on this team or in the LEC in general. He hasn't shown me anything that excites me, and these games are adding up. These games need to begin to matter. He needs to rock and roll. I don't have no idea what I clicked. Who else is a newcomer? GX remains same. KC. Rooster looked nice on the Jace, mechanically good, better than Irrelevant for sure. Looked really, really good mechanically, really showed that he's the superior, you know, Korean in this matchup in the opening games. I think that's it. The matchups that we have tomorrow, next week, it's like, look at the matchups. Besides KC Koi, I'm not in a, honestly, Koi vs GX is kind of hyped too, I guess is okay. G2 should stomp Team Heretics. I don't care how long G2 took a break. They should beat Team Heretics. MKoi should be better than GX, but then again, GX, you know, have strong early games, and I think that stylistically that matches up well against the Koi, because I do think that Koi wants to challenge you there. So maybe there's a world where we see great fireworks in the early. Eliora needs to recover from that international. I really want to see more from him. Well, like regionally, Eliora was so damn good. He really set a standard for himself, and I hope that you know, he can replicate that now in summer and bring that to an international if they do qualify. Fnatic should smoke BDS easily, and then I think KC versus Koi, I imagine, you know, this one is easier to answer after we see Koi play against GX, but we'll have to see what the form of Koi is. But I think that KC looks beatable, and I think that these teams should look similar to what we saw in the last playoffs that they played against each other. I do have to say though, something that stood out to me, if anything, is that I really like Kalist's form. I think Kalist is looking crispier, and I think that could be different. Anyhow, let me know what you guys think. Those are some easy thoughts that I just poured out. Felt like I spoke for an hour. I only spoke for 24 minutes. Damn. I felt like I talked about everything I wanted to talk about. Yeah, let me know what you guys think about the LEC format, all that jazz. If you made it all the way to this point in the video, bless you. If you sneezed during the video, this is also the time. If something is on your mind, let me know. I'm listening. I'm listening to you right now. Yeah. If there's anything that stresses you in this moment, gives you anxiety, gives you pain in any shape or form, remember past moments where you felt that same way. You can remember feeling that way at certain points in your life, but it's harder to remember why you felt that way. Maybe you can, right? If it was something very, very serious, but sometimes zooming out and understanding that the way you feel right now is okay. Your reaction to something is natural. It's important to step outside of yourself and realize that the judgment you put on yourself or the conclusions you reach now might not be the most rational, because you are in a, state of mind that might be stressed or sad or in pain, and it's not the best time for you to make those judgments. So take your time. It's okay to feel the way you feel. Zoom out and recognize that times pass. And it's very easy to let your mind race and you try to think your way out of a problem. But sometimes we're just supposed to just go through it for a bit, not take any big decisions in the process. Because I've been there where your mind is just assuming that the worst thing possible that can happen will happen. Your mind just races trying to figure out what is the worst thing that can happen and what will I do when it happens. As I mentioned, you just gotta take a step outside of yourself and say, yo, I'm right now being insanely irrational. Whatever I'm thinking, whatever I'm deciding right now is crazy talk, And also, it's okay to feel the way you're feeling. It's okay. Everyone goes through, periods like that. So take care of yourself. I don't know who I'm talking to. I felt like I needed to say this. So if you're out there, God bless you. Take care.